There we go. So it's recording again now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, because I was just talking while I was on mute too. I was saying I have everybody pinned except for Sherri, because I don't think she's on yet.
She's going to be joining in just a minute, Nikki. I just hung up with her.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. And Beth,
Yes.
are you going to be pinned first, or is
Yeah,
Molly?
It's Molly first.
Okay, all right, I'll do that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Oh, sorry about that, Molly. I didn't even see your message yet. You just messaged me that already.
Actually, I'm going to take a minute to say thank you so much, Nikki, because you are doing a great job at all the coordination, so much better than I have done in the past. So I really
Oh no, thank you. I think we're learning together.
Yes.
And you guys can see me okay too, right? Because I know it got darker on my side too. I had the same problem Beth did.
Yeah, you look okay.
Okay.
I can put in a plug. There's a Sim Women webinar that you can get access if you're a Sim member that talks about how to light up your space so that you give the best Zoom presentation that you can.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. All right, so we are at the top of the hour.
Oh, I saw
and
Sherri.
Hopefully, you all caught the introduction that we did earlier about the event. So the take action, building a diverse, sorry, now I'm getting all my words mixed up. I apologize. Take action, building an inclusive tech community. We're starting our first panel, which is recruiting diversely. Nikki is the moderator, so I will turn it over to Nikki and let her begin.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and same here. I mean, I just wanted to give a shout out to Elizabeth and everybody else on the organizing committee. I'm just so happy to be a part of this, and I thought it was a wonderful idea. Tina from ISACA, Eileen from Venture Cafe, and just everybody else that was on that committee to help put this together. I just wanted to say a big thank you. I'm really happy, and also I'm really happy that we're going to be doing this as a series, because I fully believe that one discussion and one day, one event is not enough for diversity inclusion. So I'm happy that we're going to continue this conversation, hopefully make an impactful change over time. I just want to start out, introduce myself. My name is Nikki Cabus. I actually work with Palm Beach Tech, and I want to start out just by really quickly introducing our panelists today, and then just actually passing it over to each of them to tell us a little bit more about their organizations and their role there. So I'm going to start off with just who I have first on my screen here, but I have Patrick Doliny, Chief Information Officer at Florida Memorial University, Sherri Craig, the Outreach and Development Specialist for Autism to Work at CAI, Colin McDonald, the Senior VP of Human Resources at Cross Country Healthcare, and Nikki Jennings, the VP of Channel and Cloud Sales Engineering and Services at Veeam Software. That was a mouthful, Nikki, your title. But if I could start with Patrick, if you'd like to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about what you do, and of course, your organization.
Thank you, Nikki. Always a pleasure. Good evening, fellow panelists and audience. My name is Patrick Doliny. I serve currently as the Chief Information Officer for the Florida Memorial University. Florida Memorial University is a small boutique university located in Miami Gardens. We've been here for about 50 years, 52 years to be exact, but the school's been in existence for 142 years. Having our humble beginnings in North Florida and then spending most of our time in St. Augustine. Right now, is our location. We're the only HBCU, the historically Black colleges and university in South Florida. And I look forward to this conversation. This is something that's near and dear to our heart. We certainly want to build leaders, not only in STEM and STEAM programs, but across many of our disciplines.
Thank you, Patrick. And I will go next on my screen is Colin.
All right, thank you, Nikki. And it's a pleasure to meet all the panelists. And thank you, Elizabeth, for inviting me. My name is Colin McDonald. I am the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Cross Country Healthcare. I've been with Cross Country for approximately 7 years. Cross Country is one of the largest workforce solutions staffing company in the country. What we do, we provide healthcare staffing to acute care, non-acute care hospitals throughout the nation. We also provide locum services, education services, consultative services. Again, we're one of the largest, we're publicly traded. We've been in business for approximately 40 years, and we're located in Boca Raton. We have 2 corporate offices in Boca, several satellite offices throughout the country. And I'm just happy to be here. I think this is an incredible topic to speak about, and hopefully everyone will be engaged and get something informative.
Thank you so much for that, Colin, as well. And the next one I've got on my screen is Nikki.
Yes, hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Nikki Jennings, I'm the Vice President for Pre-Sales Support and Services for Veeam Software. We provide backup and disaster recovery solutions for businesses of any size. I've been here about 2 years. I have a team of 170 employees that provide technical support and service implementations for our customers. Quick background on myself, I've been in technology for about 20 years. I started my career in IT. I've done network engineering, systems administration, and eventually moved to an IT director position. I've held various roles in product management, product marketing. I have a true passion for technology, and I have a true passion for diversity and inclusion. So thank you guys for having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Last but not least, of course, Sherri.
Yes, thank you so much, Nikki. I as well am very honored, to be joining this team tonight, and also I'm very passionate about this same mission. So I'm the Senior Outreach and Development Specialist for CAI's Autism to Work, specifically managing our outreach and relationships with our partner support organizations per state and local communities, as well as overseeing our position fulfillment through recruiting and developed pipeline of our job seekers that are diagnosed with autism. So to give you a little bit of history about CAI, we are a leading business technology services firm with nearly 40 years of experience. Our home office is in Allentown, and we have 35 satellite offices throughout the United States, including Florida. So, for us, one of our main goals is to drive value, improve productivity, enhance customer experience. And we also have over 7 years of autism employment experience. So I've actually been with our Autism to Work program for 4 years, and recruiting is my passion. So definitely very excited to be part of this session. Because the employment within diversity and inclusion is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Sherri. And for anybody that was with us a little earlier, I mean, there was the question of, basically the statement of like, people are saying, okay, actions speak louder than words. And I think that starts with recruiting and getting people of, minority groups and marginalized groups actually into some of these organizations. And then from there, obviously, is engaging those staff and building culture and so forth. But I want to talk a little bit about what actually recruiting for diversity, quote unquote, what does that actually mean to each of you? And I guess that question is for anybody and all on the panel, is what does that actually mean, recruiting for diversity?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, because for me, that's really important. I think, recruiting talent, specifically, talent, minority talent. I think that's really important in any organization, because you're getting people with different skill sets. You're getting people coming from different backgrounds who are actually going to contribute to the organization with, their values, their, their culture. All of those make a country that much more valuable. But when it comes down to diversity, I think people get really lost because they focus primarily on race or ethnicity. I think diversity comes in different flavors. You really have to think about, age. You have to think about, hiring people who are veterans. You have to think about, other sexual orientation. All of those things are all part of diversity. And when you do that, you bring that body within your organization with different ideas and different thoughts, which ultimately makes that company that much more valuable. So we have to, really branch out our thought process when it comes to diversity and start looking at all of the areas that that would affect, the type of people you bring into organization to add more value.
The one thing that I'd like to add, and that's great, Colin, that I kind of on the other side of the recruiting coin is what we refer to as imposter syndrome. And that effectively is where candidates disqualify themselves from a role because they don't feel like they meet 100% of the requirements. So I use the 80-20 rule. It's like 80% of the qualifications. Go ahead and put yourself out there and encourage those women, minorities to apply for those positions, and then educating on the other side, hiring managers on not being such a stickler about meeting every single requirement, especially in technology with certifications. And one thing that we've done is removed or reworded some of our qualifications that encourage women to apply for those positions.
Absolutely. Nikki, I can kind of play off of exactly what you're just referencing. That is a very important element. And that's one of the things that CAI puts into place within our recruiting process, is the reality that we can interview in a different way. We can train individuals as they come into the position. And it's not about fulfilling every dotted line that you see on that job description, because everyone is different. And, you need to focus on the unique things and the unique talents and skill sets that the individuals can bring to the environment, right? So recruiting is multi-factored as far as getting to know the individual, seeing where their best strengths and their highlights are, and, not being rigid with the script of that particular job description or expectation, but it's the inclination, what value can they bring, and we can build upon for that each individual. So, I agree that we can expand that diversity and we can do it in a different way.
I also would like to weigh in. I think certainly everyone touched on really the important pieces of the soft skills and the high touch environment with regards to making the decision. The funnel of applicants, and especially with the introduction of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we have to be very careful on how that is representative of the diverse community that we serve and that we live in. And how do we capture that information at the funnel level so that we're not imposing that picks up those same biases. And so I like the idea that once you get into the application level, that you're capturing some diversity information, such as, and I know Colin mentioned, just the flavor of diversity is not just an ethnicity, but how do you capture that before you actually get into the location, right? And have that conversation with the hiring manager, and we've been taught many years that, don't put your picture there on your CV or your resume, or don't, specify, certain areas, but artificial intelligence is picking up some of those keywords. And if we're consistent in hiring based on these keywords, and we're not mindful that this may be representative of a particular genre of folks, then we may passing on these biases over to AI and machine learning. So I just want to kind of bring that up as an opportunity, because if you look at just in the technology area, the digital dexterity that exists in beyond the soft skills is working through the layers and identifying the individuals that are qualified and making concessions based on the 80-20 rule, and seeing them for who they could be as opposed to who they are.
Can I just comment on one thing? I know Nikki brought this up regarding hiring managers, and I don't want to lose that that frame of thought. You know, recruiters, let me tell you, recruiters go out, they try to do the right thing. You know, we basically hire based on the knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's how we've been taught, right? You know, we don't look at your race, we don't look at your ethnicity, we don't look to see you a woman or man or whatever. We basically look for the skill sets. I think a lot of us, the leaders, the managers, those are the ones who, you know, who we need to work with when it comes down to diversity, so they can understand that, you know, it's not about someone's race, it's not about their ethnicity, it's about their knowledge, skills, and ability. And they tend to dictate exactly who they want, who they feel they should hire. And a lot of that stuff is intrinsic. And I know we'll talk about that later on, but hiring leaders, you know, really, those are the people that we truly need to focus on, because we're transactional. They're going to tell us what they need, and we're going to go out there and get it. It's just that when we get that person, we're saying this is the right person for that job. And they'll tell you, nope, don't want to do it, don't want to hire that individual. And, you know, and half the time we can't even push back. So it's just something we don't want to forget.
Colin, and thank you for that too, because I actually had a question that I wanted to kind of gear towards a comment that both Colin and Nikki had stated was, so I don't know if you realize, Colin, but I actually came from years of the staffing industry too. So I definitely, you know, hear a lot of what you're saying. And, you know, without saying any company names, I've definitely worked for an organization where when we've gone off of skill or culture fit or whatever and recommended somebody for a position, we've actually gotten pushback on no, because they're female, no, because they have a disability. And unfortunately, we do get that. And I know that even the hiring managers are not supposed to legally say those things, but they do anyway. So can you tell me, Colin, a little bit about, you know, maybe some of our own biases that are there that maybe people aren't even, you know, aware of? Or how are you training, like how is the company training the recruiters not to look at that or to think past their biases, or even to deal with, you know, when you do get a client that outright does say some of these things that you know are wrong? Like how is that being dealt with or trained?
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about, you know, let's touch on the recruiters. I think for, you know, for my organization, one of the things that we actually started doing, and I will tell you, we started a lot of this stuff, you know, once we saw what was happening with George Floyd and the social unrest. I think that just heightened, you know, our awareness of, you know, of discrimination or any of these things that's happening in our society in terms of harassment and just the intrinsic biases that, you know, that exist out there. So what we ended up doing, we started having multiple training through our onboarding portal. So any new employee who's coming in our organization, including all of the recruiters, they have to go through an intrinsic bias diversity training, right? So we not only do it now for the entire organization, but it actually started with all of our recruiters. Our existing recruiters had to go through that training. And then we inserted that same training within our onboarding system. So every new employee that's coming within the organization, they're going to be a part of that training as well. We actually took it a step further, because I mentioned the hiring leaders and making sure they understand what, you know, these intrinsic biases mean. You know, they may see someone, and because they know they grew up in the inner city, in the city Bronx neighborhood in New York, they don't want to hire them because they perceive them to be a certain way. So we started to have executive and, you know, middle tier management leadership training focusing on intrinsic biases and diversity. So we have done, all of our executive team right now have gone through it. And now we're actually in the middle of training all of our middle managers on what it's all about. So we're trying to start at the top so we can trickle down, because once we get all of the executives to buy in and all of our leaders to buy in, hopefully we can change the culture and change the attitudes. So that's really, you know, what we're trying to do right now. And look, I can't say we've been doing this for years, but it starts somewhere, and we're doing that right now.
I think
I think
also,
that's wonderful, Colin. Go ahead, Patrick.
oh no, I was going to say that I think also we have to be intentional about it, right? And I know that it touches on, perhaps a controversial statement, but, we have to ask the tough question. Are we being intentional about, who and what we're hiring? And part of that, again, is to look at our current environment and take a look at what is it that we're actually projecting, and make that decision. And by the way, Collins, I am from Brooklyn, and so I certainly identify with that.
Not from the Bronx.
Yes, and thank you both for that. And I did want to address my next question to you, Patrick, was, talking about, I personally love the word intentional because it really means putting action behind something and not just saying, okay, yeah, this is our, like for instance, our company has like a community clause, but it's words on a paper until there's actually actions behind it. So my question to you, especially being working at a historically Black college, is how can some of these employers approach some of these type of universities or colleges, or you're actually looking in different areas to find some of the new talent? Because I think a lot of the primarily affluent or white schools, they have, better programs or more internships or more just naturally more opportunities. So what can some of these employers do to reach some of these other, the other talent that's out there?
That's a great question, because that's actually one of the areas that we have an initiative specifically to address that. And we start with the students. We work, it's our iRaw initiative, and it really is, we built the word intentional and readiness for employment into the program. And so when we have conversations with our business partners, we look to make sure that they understand the relevancy of an HBCU. The social mobility that exists within an HBCU and the relevancy of their graduates, of our leaders, is so important. And we communicate that to some of our business partners that are looking to perhaps just understand a little bit more about, does an HBCU still matter in this day and age, and what are the impact, and how does that, and I learned this most recently with regards to, internships, right? And we've had some great partnerships with institutions, both national and international institutions, and they are intentional in their pursuit. So they have an active pursuit towards HBCUs, towards diversity, and because of that, we are able to align our initiative in having those conversations. And it's not always easy because, and it can be, again, part of being intentional is to lead with that question, right? So before, it was an afterthought. Yes, we were. However, here are all the qualifications, the skill sets. And I think part of the list of the CV is, in fact, that we are a diverse group. And that's part of our dexterity. That's part of the skills that we bring. We bring a different perspective to the market. I love what, we're saying about veterans and about, people with disabilities and so on, and it's not about checking the boxes. It's about truly identifying, does the workplace actually can support, ADA did a lot to impose and make sure the law supported people of disability, but what are we doing and can a person with a disability thrive in my environment? Are you being intentional about that? Because if you recognize the value, then of course you'll put some actions behind that. And that's where the conversation starts.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Patrick. And
I'd love to.
yeah, no, go ahead, Sherri, because my next question was for you. I was going to say that was a perfect, perfect segue, because I wanted to talk to you more about how, because everybody looks at, diversity when you say that, thinking of it as a cultural,
Right.
racial, gender issue. But I did want to ask you, Sherri, is how is that actually affecting our biases, recruiting and hiring for the autistic community?
Right. So to that point, and I love that word intentional, and employer that's certainly something that CAI has absolutely done within the program to be very intentional about our process, about how we interview, how we get to know our individuals that are looking for employment. They may be individuals that have been diagnosed with autism, but again, how can we remove that unconscious bias that we know may exist in many environments, even though they may not realize that it's there. So that's one of the things that we do with our client interaction. When we're hiring individuals, we are training them soft skills, workplace expectations, professionalism, as well as getting them prepared for the technical expectations within that environment that we can build upon, they can learn, develop, and create a career. But supporting the client in very intentionally, we're also providing client awareness training. So individuals that may have never heard of autism, they may not know certain characteristics or stemming or things that very intelligent individuals may do that they, as they're processing information, we're ensuring through our client awareness training and cultural integration of our team or employees into that environment, that some of those unconscious bias can be put aside. And they're learning about the individual, right, and their abilities without putting a label on a particular behavior or something that they've observed. So, absolutely, it's opening that awareness for being intentional. I love that word. So it absolutely can be done.
Yeah, and I know Sherri, from even the last panel that we had you all on, CI on, and even our last panel that we did, Beth was actually an interpreter there as well for our deaf and hard of hearing community panel. And I feel like one thing that actually, Colin, that you brought up was something that CI offers as well is the training, is actually not just teaching the job seekers or the people that are looking for the jobs and how to approach the organizations, but how the organization should be approaching them, vice versa, and and being more inclusive. And I know somebody actually in our first discussion here, with the race relay, was saying that it's really ultimately fear, and it's just not knowing that a lot of times. I mean, I know for me, I definitely have to give Beth right now, thank you for the signing, a shout out here, is because with me, reaching out to them just to learn more about their process, what does getting a signer mean, setting up the closed captioning, all this kind of stuff, I've been able to educate myself. So I think that, the more that people can actually reach out and learn and educate ourselves and do that within our own staff, that'll help that much more in being more inclusive, because we know now how to do that. I did want to ask, Nikki, is you had mentioned something about just being a female in tech. And I know that that's, a hot topic too. So one thing that I dealt with in recruiting is that we would get clients sometimes that would tell us like, okay, yes, this resume, it looks perfect on paper, but we don't know if they're going to fit our quote unquote culture, because it's all a bunch of, young white guys here. They're not going to fit in. So can you tell me maybe how you've dealt with that in your experience, or even just as a hiring manager, how maybe we can educate our leaders on, maybe combating that issue?
Yeah, I'll give my personal experience. So I like to refer to this as the good old boys club. And sorry, I've got to pick on the men. You'll see that, and I've talked to, fellow female colleagues that have been in different companies and technologies, and their feedback has been similar, is that you'll see this group of men that dress the same, they talk the same, the characteristics are the same, the profile, and effectively what they're doing is they're creating a group and a culture that eliminates, other individuals in the organization, or those that are applying to come into the organization within that particular team or ranking, that's potentially eliminated. And so Colin touched on it, Patrick, I believe you did too, is that the tone really does start at the top. And, I'll give you an example. I was at a former company and I went to the CEO and he said, hey, we've got a problem. We are not promoting diversity within the different ranks, specifically speaking on behalf of women. And he said, no, we don't have a problem. Absolutely don't have a problem. And I said, look around the boardroom. It's all white, middle-aged male. So again, I think that, you know, companies have to recognize that they have these challenges, and they have to be willing to acknowledge that it's not perfect. And they've got to put programs and training. It's so critical and fundamental in place for those things to change. And then the other side of it, those that are seeking opportunities at companies, the advice and the philosophy that I live by is you're interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you. And the advice that I like to give is ask what their core values are and how they take action on those core values and what their culture is like, and ask for specific examples. And if you have an opportunity to talk to other employees at that company, you'll start to learn a pattern and a trend. There's a lot of resources like Glassdoor, you know, it's not always 100% accurate, but provides information on what that culture is like, and decide if that's something that, you know, that's good for your fit.
Right. Can I touch on something? I got to tell you, you guys are some incredible panelists. To be honest with you. You know, all of the, you know, the points you guys are making are so on point. Something Patrick and Sherri said, and Nikki also mentioned it. You know, I like to practice what I call intentional shock. Intentional shock. And what I mean by that, you know, I'm really big on metrics and informing or shocking the leaders into knowing what your diversity metrics are. That's what we need to do, because they have no idea, you know, what sort of numbers they have within their own department until it's staring them in the face. So what we have to do as leaders, if you have that opportunity, run those numbers, you know, run those metrics, know how many women are within your organization, how many women are in supervisory role within the organization, within your department. Break it down, drill it down to the individual levels, and break it down by department. And then when you present that data, trust me, it is a shock to them, because it's not something they're aware of. Not to say any of them did any of these things intentionally, but they're just not aware. And this goes into the unconscious bias of hiring. And I call it similar to me bias, where you hire somebody who's similar to you, so you keep perpetuating, you know, that same type of person. But when you show them the data that, look, you know, we only have 20% women within our organization, our minority, we only have 5%. Guys, and look at your department, you don't have any minorities, and we're looking at all minorities. So run those metrics, and you know, it's you're shocking them, but you're doing it intentionally.
Just a quick question for the panel. Do you guys feel that companies are more open to talking and going through that quantitative data and saying, wow,
Nope.
This is a problem?
Nope, not at all. Not at all. It's a hard conversation. Nope.
Right.
And it goes beyond I know this is centered around recruitment, but retention as well, right? So there's a component that exists that we have to be mindful of. You know, the life cycle of, we can go out and intentionally hire, but because our biases is speaking volume in our ears, the evaluation, the treatment, and the landscape changes. And so we still impose those biases into the process. And if you start looking at, I like the idea of shocking them, because, and it has to go, not just take a look at your current organization and look at the metrics there, but how are you treating them, and what contributed to the scoring that you did during the evaluation period that may have been part of the biases. You may have met the metrics, but are you consistently managing them in accordance to their capabilities? And did you set the bar unfairly? Because, you know, there's a whole dynamic there that goes beyond recruitment and into retention that may be also contributing to the fact that, and what happens is that then we get the idea, and the perception becomes our reality, and the reputation follows, right? So I don't want to go work for that organization, or particularly that department or that manager, because, and you really can't put your finger on it because it doesn't actually, it's not, it appears on the surface that everything is great, but are we still intentionally managing and supporting those that are considered with disability, those that have some accommodations, and so on and so forth. So absolutely. But I like that shocking. I think I'm going to do that to myself.
Absolutely.
You might steal that one, Patrick.
Make an
I
impact.
certainly will.
I've stolen a lot of things already, so don't worry about it.
Right.
Well, and I love that you said that, Colin, because, you know, one of the questions that I had put together for you all was, you know, how can companies work towards building their like diversity brand so that the community knows? But I think that that is a really important piece that both you and Patrick brought up, is that not only the outward brand in the recruiting effort, but also, like you said, the retention, because there's definitely a lot of companies that, you know, you'll see best places to work and blah, blah, blah. And you'll see a lot of things, you know, like you said, on these different platforms where, I mean, again, won't say who, but I worked for a company in the past that would say, hey, we'll give you guys something if you go online and give us a good review and blah, blah, blah. And of course, we're not going to tell our boss no when we're working there that I'm not going to go put a positive review online. But it's some of these things that how can a company that's truly trying to work on diversity, equity, inclusion, really build that brand externally so that people know? And then also, I think, second side of that question is, how do we gauge whether it's true or not? Like, what are some of those things that people can look into, questions to ask? Like, how do we know the difference?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, to Patrick's point, right, is that, you know, you can have numbers, you know, and call them metrics, right? So the numbers may be there that their diversity employment number is, but what is the support, right? Where are the appropriate accommodations and support being provided to that individual so they can remain a long-term employee where they can develop their career in a place where they feel safe and they feel appreciated and valued for what they're bringing to the table, right? So Nikki mentioned Glassdoor, right? So, you know, there has to be other forums that individuals can really get a feel for what employees really think of that company. You know, a past employee, LinkedIn, you know, other sources that can help an individual make that appropriate two-way street evaluation. Is this a company that I could work for? Getting that message or branding out, I agree. It's a very important topic of how can you appropriately do that without just saying, well, we have this many, really reflecting that true experience.
I say it's all about action, you know, and it's all about you know, a lot of companies far too often say, you know, we're all about diversity, we're all about, you know, inclusion and promotion of minorities and females. My question is, what are you doing? What programs do you have in place? What resources? Are those programs funded? Do you have executive sponsorship for those programs? And one thing that we do at Veeam, I participate in our what we call Women in Green, and it's actually led by both men and women to help, you know, employees with career development. We have a lot of guest speakers come in, and we sponsor a lot of events, and we post that on the recordings on social media outlets, you know, just promoting and showing that, hey, these are the things that we're taking action on to you know, move this effort forward.
Yep. I can tell you two things that we're doing and the way we try to measure this. So, you know, we have, you know, both a corporate social responsibility initiative as well as our diversity initiative. From a diversity standpoint, we have within the organization a group, an employee-led group. It's called Cross Country Impact. So this is our diversity group within the organization. We call it Powerful Voices, Powerful Voices, Numerous Cultures, One Cross Country. So this group gets together on a monthly basis and we come up with activities, right? Not only do we recognize all of the different, you know, holidays that are coming up and all of the different, you know, months, we recognize all of those things as part of our diversity initiative, but we also put all of the pictures on social media. We also have an external website. So we provide an employee value proposition out there for our company. So when employees are looking, they can see all of the wonderful things that we have done, especially through the cross-country impact. The other thing that we're doing, and this is all part of our corporate social responsibility, and it also goes back into our diversity initiative. We measure this. We do a corporate social responsibility brochure annually, something that we recently started, and we measure the success by participating in the global standard board. This is a GRI, and we actually have to submit data on ethnicity, environment, race, culture, all of these different things, and we get rated on that, as well as a Bloomberg equity study, gender equity study. So we have to fill that out as well and enter information. How many women you have, what's the top 10% of women, how much do they make, how they rank within your organization. So anyone can go on our platform and look at the information, but we're making it a conscious effort to be more visual with these things that we're doing. And it's all part of our, our cross-country impact and our corporate social responsibility initiatives.
Very good. And I did want to switch gears a little bit and talk about just our current situation of COVID and the pandemic and how that's changed recruiting. And I know that recently talking to some of our partners at Palm Beach Tech, CareerSource, and also Premier Virtual. Premier Virtual is basically a virtual job fair platform. But they both were saying that since going virtual and having to do all these job fairs and career expos virtually, that they've actually been able to effectively reach more of the veterans, women, people with disabilities, those groups. But do you think it helps to reach the underserved communities? And I mean, because I know a lot of them may or may not even have computers or Wi-Fi. And do you think that even the positives that we've seen, if they're going to be long lasting?
Oh, wow. I can certainly speak to that. While we take credit for having pivoted pretty rapidly during COVID-19, one of the things that we quickly learned is the digital inclusion and the gap that still exists to date. And let me clarify digital inclusion. It's not always about not having access to Wi-Fi or a computer. It may be the skill gaps as well, right? And when the students had to go back to their home, do they have an appropriate, safe learning environment or working environment within the home that they're in to be able to accomplish the tasks that are being given to them, whether as a student or as a faculty member that's now having to teach online. And so definitely that brings a whole other dynamics in terms of, inclusivity with regards to how do you find that an individual. So, before it used to be, find a local cafe, and the internet cafes of yesteryears or the Starbucks. Those were off limit as well during the early days of COVID-19. And so we had, and we grew at the university, we actually grew our staff because of the various initiatives that we had. We continued to grow, we continued to recruit, we continued to provide new services. We were bringing band online, we were bringing football after 60 some odd years at the university. So we were guns blazing, getting out there, and we quickly learned that the folks just didn't have the means, and so we had to get creative. It wasn't easy. I don't have an answer necessarily because we're still dealing with that, and we're still trying to adjust. But it is a whole other dynamic that we didn't anticipate.
Very true. And I can join in on that. Absolutely, we've all had to make new navigational processes with our current environment. And there are things that have come up that we may not have expected before. And I would say that the remote work, right, for individuals of diverse backgrounds or special accommodation or disability, whatever it may be, that may not have been an option previously, right? So to your point, Patrick, we can't make assumptions of what that individual has at home, what they're, what they have access to, their internet, their environment. Do they have a quiet place where they can effectively work from a remote standpoint? But as an employer, we absolutely have adjusted our processes. So all of our pre-qualification and recruiting that we do within Autism to Work, these past months, we've been working intently background to transition it to us doing it virtually as well, so that we're not missing out on these individuals who are still looking for employment, needing employment now more than ever, right? That we can do our meeting sessions in a virtual Zoom session, and we can actually do our 60-hour pre-employment training in a virtual setting. So it's still opening that door for the opportunity to go to that employment role within our client space with new methodologies and new processes, right? So there's definitely new navigations, and we're all learning how to do it, as well as our clients, our companies that we're working with, is opening their eyes to these different processes and ways that we can be successful and do it remote if we need to.
Yeah, I mean, the attention span, for example, and I'm sure in the autism community, working online may be, and that may be a positive, and I don't want to necessarily be myopic about this, but one of the things that I've been talking for about 2 years now at the university is gamification. Gamification in the workforce to engaging the employees to get the best out of them. And people respond to that. They respond to unlocking the next level and identifying the system and so on. So gamification, there's a great book by one of the Gartner analysts called Gamify that actually speaks to that I've had circulated at least a dozen times at the university because I couldn't get it enough printed or enough delivered. And so that's another area that whether, in a remote work environment or remote study environment, when you're recruiting and the position potentially could be a remote work, how are you going to adjust? Do you have the discipline to be at home? And as an employer, as a supervisor, how am I going to evaluate your work based on, it's a brand new world.
You're right. It has to be an additional piece of the training, right?
Absolutely.
We all have to get educated, on that and, support employees to be able to be their best despite the situation.
Correct.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a perfect word, Sherri, is education. Because going back to what I was saying earlier, just that fear of not knowing, I think that's part of our biases there. So I think educating I think it solves not all, but maybe half the problem is just knowing more about the other communities, other people, their cultures. I think that's a big piece of it. I know we've got about 2 minutes left. So I want to, one, if anybody that's in here in Zoom with us wants to drop any questions in chat, but then while I'm waiting for any of those questions or comments, just wanted to ask each of the panelists if you guys wanted to give us one final statement that I guess, whether you want to talk to the job seeker side or to our hiring managers, what would be, I guess, your last words there for today's panel?
Well, for me, and I think I mentioned it, earlier, for recruiters, certainly continue to do what you've been trained to do, hire people based on their knowledge, their skills and abilities. I think that's really important. That's how we start off. For job seekers, if you are out there and you're looking for opportunity, no matter which sector you're choosing to work in, go into it knowing that you're qualified for the job. Don't go into, that interviewing process thinking you're going to be denied because of any sort of the Title VII, issues, your race, religion, sex, or any of that, your disability. I think think if you're qualified, you need to put your best foot forward and going there with that level of confidence, knowing that whoever's going to be interviewing you, they're going to be looking for you to have those knowledge, skills, and abilities and not those unconscious bias. Because if we train our staff correctly, that will not be a barrier in preventing you from getting that opportunity. It will be basically what you know.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, we touched on it earlier, remember it's the 80-20, right? Don't eliminate yourself from an opportunity because you're not 100% on that skill set. And I think as you go through the interview process, it's okay to talk about those areas of opportunities where you need to or want to improve, and just be very open about that with the company. The other thing is that we mentioned earlier is to interview that company just as much as they're interviewing you. Ask what they're doing about the actions on diversity, inclusion, resources for you, your family, tools, and things like that, because it does change your life. Work is our life, and it's important that we find the good fit for us.
Excellent point.
Very good point. I can say also comments that I've lived by. My daughter, who's 22 years old, actually brought this to my attention. It's a journey, and so be loyal to the journey and flexible to the approach. You may have to adjust along the way. I've said this to her many times. Quite frankly, I didn't realize that she was listening. So she actually posted that on social media recently. She says, my dad always says, be loyal to the journey, but flexible to the approach. And that's the advice that I would give. Be persistent, be confident, be loyal to the journey, but be willing to be flexible to the approach. You may have to adjust. Interview the company as much as they are interviewing you. I like that. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah.
I just wrote your quote down too.
Yeah. It's a great quote. I love that. It is a journey, right? And it's something that doesn't happen overnight. You have to have faith. It is a two-way street, and just keep that path moving forward. Absolutely, because there are employers out there that will listen. They do want to listen. They do want to employ for what you can bring, right, without those unconscious bias. So sometimes, again, it's just that a journey, really to get there. So, this was a pleasure to be with all of you, and definitely want to say that if there's any job seekers out there, as a recruiter, I will pull that in, that if there are any job seekers out there, you can always reach out to CAI and to Autism to Work. We do have a very specific email address that you can contact us. It's autism to work @cai.io. We'd love to help you with your journey. So I encourage you all to investigate and take your personal space in that journey of employment.
Thank you so much to you all. I think actually, Patrick, we're probably gonna have a lot of people tomorrow morning on their LinkedIn's are gonna be sharing loyal to the journey, flexible to the approach, because I wrote it down too. So I love that one. I just see one question in chat that I thought was important. So, and I know we're right at time, but so I'll just ask this one, but Audrone, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Audrone asked, to build on the question that Nikki posed about working from home, any advices for hiring managers in terms of being mindful for asking for video calls due to potential tech issues? Said any other considerations that may be easy to overlook but are important for finding diverse employees?
This is not a practice that we currently employ, so by no exact imagination that I would say that. However, I did read an article, the EU started turning a lot of their libraries into co-working spaces or co-learning spaces. And so if in fact there are some challenges in the home, co-working spaces, even if it's a flexible seat or a hot seat, are an alternative way of you still getting that both the connectivity as well as that space that you may need to conduct that. And I have been actually pushing for that for internal to the university to possibly repurpose some of the spaces that we have for that reason, because we're adjusting.
You know, I would say, you know, for the person who asked that question, we're living in a different world. And I think, you know, when we talk about Zoom Teams and any sort of video interview, video meetings, that's where it's going to be for some time. I would recommend, if you do have an opportunity to interview and it's going to be on video, you want to make sure you have the link on your phone as well as on your PC. Two things that I would do, I will certainly ask that recruiter or that hiring manager to maybe run a test on your system prior to the interview. That's the first thing. But if you're in that interview and all of a sudden the system goes down on your PC because you're using your home network, don't forget you have a cell phone, and that cell phone has its own data, has its own system, so you could automatically switch over to that as well. So those are the two things that I would recommend that you prepare for. Is using your home and also your phone to do that.
And then I'll just add on to, I think we are much more forgiving and we give grace on connectivity issues and things of that nature these days. Dogs barking, I have 2 kids, they show up at my meetings. So it's okay if it happens. It's stressful, but again, we're in a different world, so.
Agreed.
Perfect. Yes, I feel you on that. I've got the 2 kids and 2 dogs also. So I've been praying this whole time that neither one's going to bark or come in here yelling. So, but we're right at time. So I want to hand it back over to Elizabeth. I don't know if you've got some closing words or setting up for kind of next steps here.
So just that we're going to take about a 5-minute break and we'll come back at 7 o'clock for our final session of the day, which should be great. It's about creating an inclusive culture. So take a moment, get up, stretch, come back at 7 and we'll continue.
Perfect. And thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate it. And everybody for watching.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Fantastic.
Cheers. Bye.
Great meeting you all. Hi.
Nikki, can you stop the recording again?